A kingdom surrounded by smiles. The island wakes before the sun. Mist curls low over the highlands of Madagascar, clinging to red earth and rice fields like a held breath. Birds cry out from the trees. Fires spark to life in village hearths. The land is green, ancient and watchful, alive in a way that remembers every footstep that has ever crossed it. Out beyond the reefs, the sea carries strangers. Tall ships hover on the horizon, pale and patient, their sails catching the early light like promises. They come quietly, they always do, with polished boots and folded hands, with books pressed to their chests and contracts tucked neatly under their arms. They smile the way people smile when they believe they are inevitable. They say they bring God. They say they bring trade. They say they bring progress. On the cliffs above the capital, a woman watches the water and does not return the smile. Ranavalona stands still, wrapped in dark silk and authority, her face unreadable, her posture relaxed in the way of someone who knows exactly where she is standing. She has seen these men before, or men like them. She has listened to their translators. She has heard the soft language of salvation that always seems to end in obedience. She understands something they don't. This land is not empty. This kingdom is not naive. And she is not impressed. Behind her, the court murmurs. Advisors shift their weight. Some see opportunity. Others feel unease crawling up their spines. They know the stories whispered beyond the island, of empires growing fat on other people's soil, of kings who signed treaties and woke up conquered. Ranavalona says nothing. She does not need to shout to be heard. She does not need to threaten to be feared. Her silence stretches, heavy and deliberate, until even the most confident voices quiet themselves. She is not wondering if these foreigners are dangerous. She is deciding how much danger they represent, and what price she is willing to make them pay. The throne she sits on was never meant for her. She was not born to rule by clean lines of inheritance or polite ceremony. She learned power the hard way, by watching who survived and who disappeared, by noticing which smiles hid knives, by understanding that mercy, offered too early, becomes an invitation. Ranavalona does not intend to invite anyone in. Before the missionaries build their churches, before the merchants rewrite the laws, before the world decides Madagascar is something to be owned, she will choose isolation over submission, fear over dependence, sovereignty over approval. History will call her cruel. Europe will call her mad. Time will call her many things. But here, in this moment, with the island breathing beneath her feet and the ships waiting beyond the reef, Ranavalona is simply doing what no one else will, protecting her kingdom, no matter the cost.
Ranavalona was not born with a crown waiting. She came into the world without ceremony, without prophecy, without anyone whispering that she would someday rule. Her beginnings were ordinary by royal standards, useful, forgettable, survivable. In a kingdom where bloodlines mattered, she did not arrive marked for greatness, which meant no one was watching her closely. She grew up learning the quiet rules: who spoke first, who survived mistakes, which alliances lasted only until the next harvest. She learned how quickly favor could turn brittle, how easily protection vanished when it became inconvenient. Ranavalona noticed patterns long before she had power. She watched women traded between households like livestock. She watched men rise on promises and fall on rumors. She watched mercy extended and then weaponized against the merciful. The world did not reward goodness. It rewarded awareness, so she learned to be aware. Her life changed when King Andrianampoinimerina, one of the great unifiers of Madagascar, took her under royal protection. Adoption into the royal household was not kindness, it was strategy. But strategy came with education, proximity, and survival. Inside the palace, Ranavalona sharpened. She listened. She remembered. She waited. She learned court language, the careful pauses, the half-promises, the way silence could end arguments faster than shouting. She learned that power rarely announced itself. It revealed itself only when someone tried to take it away. Ranavalona did not yet know she would rule, but she already knew this. The world was not gentle, and neither would she be.
The king died suddenly. Radama I,
young, ambitious, and dangerously open to European influence, left no clear plan that could not be contested. His death cracked the court wide open. Succession in Madagascar was never a neat line. It was a scramble disguised as tradition. Rivals moved immediately. Princes claimed legitimacy. Military leaders measured loyalty. Advisors recalculated survival. The palace filled with whispers sharp enough to draw blood. Ranavalona moved faster. She did not have the strongest claim. She did not have the loudest supporters, but she had something far more dangerous: preparation. She understood who feared what. She knew which alliances were fragile and which were performative. She knew where hesitation lived. While others argued legality, she secured loyalty. While others planned speeches, she planned removals. While others waited for consensus, she created inevitability. The night Radama died, Ranavalona did not mourn publicly. She consolidated. By the time the sun rose, her name was already moving through the palace like a verdict. Those who opposed her disappeared quietly. Those who hesitated were forced to choose quickly. Those who survived understood the message immediately. This was not a mistake. This was not chaos. This was succession by control. When Ranavalona was crowned, there was no illusion about what had happened. Blood had paid for stability. Fear had purchased order. The kingdom accepted her rule not because they loved her, but because they understood her. And Ranavalona understood them back. She did not claim the throne believing she would be celebrated. She claimed it knowing she would be remembered. In a world already circling with foreign ambition and internal fracture, Madagascar did not need a ruler who asked permission. It needed someone willing to be blamed. And Ranavalona accepted the crown with clear eyes and steady hands, fully aware that from this moment on, history would sharpen its knives. She did not flinch. The crown did not come to Ranavalona gently. It came slick with urgency, carried through corridors that smelled of sweat and fear, passed hand to hand by people who understood exactly what delay would cost them. Succession was never a ceremony first, it was a calculation. Those calculations ended in blood. Rivals were named quickly. Some were princes, some were generals, some were men who had smiled too confidently the day before. They were removed before they could gather momentum, before loyalty had time to solidify around them. Executions followed tradition just closely enough to look legitimate. Bodies disappeared just fast enough to look orderly. The court learned its lesson in a single night. By morning, silence replaced argument. Eyes lowered, voices softened. Stability settled like ash. Ranavalona was crowned not in celebration, but in relief. The rituals unfolded beneath watchful ancestors and unmoving stone. Drums beat slow and steady. Priests spoke the ancient words that bound ruler to land, land to people. When the crown touched her head, Ranavalona did not smile. She did not need to. Everyone in the courtyard already knew. This reign would not be negotiated. She stood upright, shoulders squared, gaze level, not reaching for approval, not pretending humility. Power did not sit awkwardly on her. It recognized her immediately. Madagascar had a queen, and the queen had made it very clear what dissent would cost. They came again, as they always do, after the blood has dried. Missionaries arrived first, carrying Bibles worn smooth from travel, speaking softly about salvation and progress. They bowed, they praised, they asked permission to teach, to convert, to improve the people. Behind them came the merchants. Contracts followed prayers, ink followed hymns, weapons followed trade agreements. The language was polite, patient, endlessly reasonable. They spoke of partnership, of civilization, of friendship. Ranavalona listened. She watched how the missionaries looked at her court, curious, judgmental, certain they understood what they were seeing. She noticed how the traders smiled wider when discussing weapons than when discussing cloth. She noticed how often the word help appeared next to the word obedience. She had watched this pattern before. She had seen how kingdoms elsewhere signed agreements and woke up rearranged, how rulers who accepted guidance slowly lost the right to say no. Ranavalona did not believe in accidents. So she asked questions, she requested explanations, she let them talk. And while they spoke, she decided. Christianity was not banned because she feared God. Trade was not restricted because she feared progress. She feared dependency. She saw clearly what they were offering. Not faith, not commerce, but leverage. A slow, tightening grip disguised as generosity. A future where Madagascar would answer to foreign laws, foreign gods, foreign interests. Ranavalona refused. Missionaries were expelled. Conversions were outlawed. Foreign influence was cut back to the bone. Treaties were torn apart before they could harden into chains. The Europeans recoiled. They called her backward. They called her savage. They called her irrational. Ranavalona did not correct them. She had chosen isolation over invasion, control over applause, fear over gratitude. And in doing so, she crossed the line that empire never forgives. From this moment on, she would not merely rule, she would resist. And resistance, history would later decide, was the most unforgivable crime of all. Once Ranavalona decided, she did not hesitate. The gates closed, not just the physical ones along the coast and highlands, but the invisible ones that kept influence from seeping inward. Foreign customs were restricted. European dress disappeared from court. Christian worship was outlawed, not quietly, but decisively. This was not paranoia. This was boundary setting at scale. Missionaries who remained were watched closely. Converts were forced to renounce their faith publicly, not because Ranavalona needed spectacle, but because she understood something crucial. Belief is contagious. Once a foreign god takes root, foreign authority follows. She had no intention of letting Madagascar become a mission field that turned into a colony. Trade continued, but on her terms. Weapons were controlled, treaties were rewritten, foreign advisors were dismissed. The island did not slam its doors in panic, it locked them with intention. Isolation was not an accident of fear, it was a policy, and policies have consequences. European powers bristled. They warned of stagnation, of backwardness, of inevitable collapse. Ranavalona listened to none of it. She did not measure success by approval abroad. She measured it by one thing only. Was Madagascar still hers? As long as the answer was yes, the criticism was irrelevant. Fear became the architecture of the state. Ranavalona ruled with laws that were unforgiving and punishments that were public. Trials were swift. Accusations were dangerous. The infamous Tangina ordeal, poison used to determine guilt, spread terror through the population. Forced labor expanded. The army tightened its grip. Europeans called it madness. Ranavalona called it control. The kingdom stabilized, not because people felt safe, but because they felt watched. Rebellion died before it learned to breathe. Foreign influence stalled. Madagascar remained unconquered while neighboring regions fell into European hands. This was the cost. Population declined. Suffering spread. The line between justice and cruelty blurred until it nearly vanished. Ranavalona knew this. She was not blind to the pain her rule caused. She simply believed the alternative was worse. A conquered Madagascar would not remember its gods. A colonized Madagascar would not choose its future. A civilized Madagascar would answer to someone else's laws. Ranavalona chose terror over erasure. She did not pretend it was noble. She did not frame it as kindness. She ruled with the clarity of someone who understood that empire never asks politely twice. History would later tally the deaths and call her monstrous. What it would not tally as easily was this. During her reign, Madagascar remained free. No flag planted, no governor installed, no foreign crown imposed. Ranavalona did not rule gently. She ruled effectively. And effectiveness, when wielded by a woman against empire, has always been labeled insanity. The name did not come from her people. It came from across the sea. European writers, missionaries, traders, men who had been turned away, expelled, silenced, began to write Ranavalona into something unrecognizable. Their accounts traveled faster than ships. They painted her as hysterical, bloodthirsty,
irrational, a woman unfit to rule, a tyrant, a lunatic. It was easier than admitting failure, easier than writing, "She saw us coming and said no." They described her punishments in lurid detail and ignored their own empire's body counts. They catalogued her laws with disgust while exporting slavery and famine elsewhere. They framed her resistance as madness because strategy would have demanded respect. Ranavalona understood none of this mattered. She did not read their papers. She did not answer their accusations. She did not soften to win their approval. Inside Madagascar, her authority was absolute. The court obeyed, the army held, the island remained intact. Whatever chaos existed beyond her borders stayed there. Madness implies lack of control. Ranavalona had too much control to qualify. But control extracts payment. Forced labor hollowed villages, fear thinned families. The Tangena ordeal left scars that no law could justify away. The population declined, slowly at first, then noticeably. Even those who believed in sovereignty began to whisper questions they did not dare ask aloud. Was this protection or sacrifice? Ranavalona did not deny the cost. She simply refused to pretend there was a cheaper option. Independence was not free. It never had been. And unlike rulers who outsourced cruelty to foreign governors, she owned every decision openly. Her rule demanded endurance, from the land, from the people, from herself. She aged in power, hardened in posture, less patient with dissent, less tolerant of ambiguity. A queen shaped by siege mentality never leaves the battlefield, even when the enemy pauses. And yet, while Africa was carved, while treaties erased borders, while flags multiplied, Madagascar remained its own. Not untouched, not unscarred, but unconquered. Ranavalona knew history would count the dead. She also knew history would never count the futures that vanished under colonial rule elsewhere. The languages lost, the gods forgotten, the sovereignty traded for railroads and prayers. She ruled, knowing she would be judged. She ruled anyways.
Ranavalona never attempted to rehabilitate her image. She did not issue gentler decrees toward the end of her life. She did not ease restrictions to soothe foreign opinion. She did not rewrite her own story in advance of history's judgment. She ruled until the end exactly as she had begun, with intention. Advisors aged out. Enemies learned patience or disappeared. The machinery of fear and order continued to grind forward, not because it was elegant, but because it worked. Madagascar remained closed, independent, difficult to access, impossible to own. Ranavalona understood something many rulers never do. Once you begin ruling to be liked, you stop ruling at all. So she didn't pretend kindness where there was none. She didn't wrap brutality in rhetoric. She made no attempt to be misunderstood as benevolent. She chose sovereignty. And she paid for it in blood, reputation, and isolation. Ranavalona I died in 1861. She did not die dethroned. She did not die conquered. She did not die asking forgiveness. Her death was orderly. The court transitioned. The kingdom exhaled, relieved, shaken, unsure what softness might look like after so many years of iron. The world waited. Europe sharpened its pens, because the only thing more threatening than a woman who rules brutally is a woman who does it successfully. They wasted no time. European historians branded her mad. Missionaries described her as a demon. Writers framed her reign as proof that women, left unchecked, devolved into chaos. They counted the dead loudly and ignored the alternative future they had intended for Madagascar. Colonial rule came soon after her death. Christianity returned. Treaties followed. Flags appeared. The island entered the familiar pattern Ranavalona had spent her life trying to prevent. And suddenly, her reign looked less insane and more prophetic. What if she wasn't irrational? What if she understood empire perfectly? What if terror wasn't madness, but policy? Ranavalona ruled in a century where resistance required brutality and mercy invited annexation. She chose to be feared rather than managed, isolated rather than absorbed, hated rather than owned. History prefers its female rulers softened, redeemed, tragic.
Ranavalona offers none of that. She was not gentle. She was not kind. She was not safe. She was effective. Picture an island standing alone, scarred, exhausted, still free. A queen seated on a throne no empire could take while she lived. A woman history still argues over because it doesn't know how to categorize her without indicting itself. Ranavalona I did not rule so the world would remember her fondly. She ruled so her kingdom would exist tomorrow, and for a time, because of her, it did.
If her story made you uneasy, it should have.
History is full of women who ruled softly and were forgiven. It is far less comfortable with women who ruled effectively and never apologized. Subscribe as we continue to exhume the lives of the dark heroines. Next time, we leave palaces and politics behind and ride into the open steppe, where a queen faced the most powerful man in the ancient world and destroyed him so completely that history tried to turn her into a myth. Next time, Tomyris, the queen who ended an empire. Stay dangerous, stay loud, and never let them hold the pen.